Hi there, welcome back. Well, welcome back to this Pioneer SX-1050. And as I said when I signed off from the last video, I was going to carry on with cleaning up switches and pots and controls and everything else. And I was also going to possibly do a recapping on this. Well, I have. I've done a recapping. I've done the cleaning. This thing is a real bummer to take out, but as X-Ray Tony describes, as long as you follow this one step at a time, it's actually doable. But let me show you what's happened. A few things have happened here. Nice things have happened here, which resulted from the cleaning, but also from the recapping. I'll give you a closer look. Now, because this is a preamp board or a level amplifier, flat amplifier board, it's basically the audio controls. There's the selection of the inputs over there, those switches. That's above this board. This one handles all the stereo mono selection, attenuation. That's attenuation at the top, the volume control, stereo and loudness, balance control, which is notoriously noisy on these sets. And then you've got, what have we got here? Oh, this is the tape selection, monitor or tape, and the duplicate switch. Now these are all on here, and because these are all low voltage, generally you wouldn't have a problem with the capacitors, except perhaps those bigger filter caps, those two there and those two there. But what I found is something strange happened when I replaced all the caps, and I replaced all the electrolytics as well as those little, well, you can hardly see that, but there's one little guy in there. That was a tantalum. Two in there. And another two down here. I think two, yeah. Now these are tantalums, and there's another one. I replaced these with those Nishikon Golds. They are 2.2 microfarads and 1 microfarads. And when I did that, something strange happened. The stereo came back. Now, if you recall, when I had this thing on stereo, I was only getting one channel. And when I had it on mono, I was getting two channels. So that told me one thing it could have been was the switches, but I think it was actually more than the switches. I think one of the actual signal paths was being interrupted by one of the caps. And what's happened since is that it's come back. So let me show you the results. I've got the signal generators feeding a 1 kilohertz signal into there. The same signal is going into both channels, left and right. And I've got this thing connected to the light bulbs. I'm still leaving it on restriction, just for safety's sake. Let me put it on. 2 clicks. One is the protection relay at the in the soft start circuit, and the other one is the actual speaker protection. And I've got auxiliary selected, and I'm touching the volume control. As you can see, no oscillation. And if I put that up, that's what we get. Now, I could do this, but I want to be able to see them separately. There we go. So we've got a 1.4 volts RMS signal coming out there. This is monitoring at the speakers. I've got it on dummy load, obviously. Now, if I go to attenuation, 20 dB attenuation, remember when I was doing this and I put it back, only half came back. So that's okay. This is the loudness control. This is the stereo mono. Now, as you see, because the signals are identical, we're getting exactly the same signals going through whether I've got stereo or mono. Here's my balance control. Working beautifully. This is the tape monitor, tape 1, tape 2. This one's still a little bit dirty. I've still got to clean this one a little bit more, as you can see. There's another, this is, what is it? What is this? This is adapter. Sorry, the first one was adapter. Second one is tape 2 monitor. Third one is tape 3 monitor. And this one is duplicate. So the only one that I need to clean a bit more is that one. As you can see, as soon as I've There we go. It's still fading a little bit. So it still needs a bit more spray. And the stuff, you've got to do this very carefully. You've got to spray it, clean it, spray it, clean it. And just keep doing it. Just keep repeating it. It'll take a while. It'll take quite a few repetitions. But as you go through with it, more and more of the grime gets cleaned away. Now, I did not take this panel out here. Tony does this. He removes this panel. It's easy enough. It's, you know, about 4 screws or something, and then you can desolder the pots. But I've got this thing here, which I've got a hook on there. I've actually bent it, and I can get it into the pots from below. So that means I don't need to desolder them. The problem with desoldering something like this is always, I always say this, the biggest risk you have with working with one of these things is that you can break those connectors. One of these solid wires can just break off, or something else goes wrong when you desolder or solder something on here. So I try to dismantle as little as possible so that I don't create more problems than it's already had. Anyway, that one is done, and I need to put it back, and I'll show you what I'm going to work on next. As I was looking at this, I realized there was something I hadn't mentioned. The actual power supply section here is very important. It's where the main filtering happens for the, well, really the control voltages. I believe it's 24 volts. I hadn't shown the recap of that one. That's probably one of the most important places to recap. And it only takes 3 capacitors. And this actually had something which I expected, but it was worse than I expected. If you look at this, these are the 2 caps that they had on there. Now, if you look at the one on the left, see that bobbin on that bob at the top there? That one there was about to go. The one on the right seems to be fine. The one on the left is really, really, really pushing out. And it's not just the plastic wrap. These are, what is it, 80 volts, 470 microfarads. I've replaced them with 470 microfarad 100 volt Nishikons. They should last a very long time. These actually came with a 3rd pin on here. This pin is not internally connected. It's just to stabilize the cap when you solder it. Those are bent properly, and they seem to be pretty sturdy, so I don't need to worry about that. So what I'll be doing next after I put the top one in is I'll be doing exactly the same to this board. This one has the tone controls, and I'll be doing exactly the same. I'm going to recap it. Anything that's electrolytic or tantalum, I'm going to replace. It's just not worth risking it. Above that are the switches for the speakers. Now, I know I've got a problem with one of the speaker switches. Speaker switch A is not connecting properly, so that needs cleaning. So I'll be cleaning that. So that's it. That's the next step. This section, cleaning those switches at the top, it's the filter switches and the there's actually the multipath at the top there as well, the multipath switches. Multipath and muting for FM is on the top there, just on the front obviously. So I'll be cleaning all that, and I'll show you this when I'm ready to put it back. There's also one more section which is very, very important, which I haven't touched yet. And that is this guy over here. Behind here we've got the phono preamp board. And that will be, well, as you can see, it's pretty sensitive, so it's covered with this metal casing. And that's obviously very important to make sure it's working properly and that it's recapped and all nice and clean. So yeah, I've got my work cut out for me. We haven't even touched the radio yet. And I think there's something with the FM. It might be resolved by all the switching issues that we've done here and cleaned up here. The FM is not really tuning in properly. It tunes in, but there's a discrepancy between the signal strength that you can hear and the strength that you see on the meter and the actual tuning indicator. So we'll need to see what's wrong with that. But again, it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm going to get on with this and report back as we go along. All right, folks, one more section to report on. This is the Turnboard, and this thing has had a lot of stuff replaced. All the capacitors were replaced in here, and there were a lot of them. I've measured them. Some of them were, well, none of them were dead or completely open or completely shorted, but some of them had some pretty high ESRs. I've replaced this with some really high quality Nichicons, as usual. And I'm ready to put this in. Now this thing has got a metal shield. This is the shield. Now this just tells you that this is a very sensitive section of the audio, and they shield it so that it protects against noise. I've also cleaned all the switches at the top there. Those are a real bummer to get out, but well, got to be done. And let's have a closer look at this. There are a lot of caps in here. And then of course all the pots have been properly cleaned out and tweaked many times. So I'm ready to put the shield back on and put this back in there, and we can test it again. Well folks, that's done as well. The tone amp is completed. Put back, everything cleaned up. None of the wires broken. Yep, you do have to check that. That can be a real pain. All these guys properly cleaned. And now I want to do some testing on the audio. Let's start with some basic stuff. I've got a 50 Hertz wave coming in there. And down at the tone control, if I put tone defeat, it does nothing. Tone control, I've got the 50 Hertz setting. I think that's at 0. That's -5, -2.5, 0, +2.5, +5. So that's working perfectly. Let me take this up to the next control is at 100 Hertz. The 100 Hertz base setting goes from ±10 dB. There's -10 dB. There's +10 dB. Where's the middle? I think that's it. This is a switched system, obviously. Again, tone defeat takes it practically to 0, but the tone is on. Let's go to the high frequencies where it tells us we have controls for 10 kilohertz and 20 kilohertz. So if I put 10 kilohertz on here, that is indeed what we expect. Okay, 10 kilohertz. The first control goes from -10 dB to +10 dB. Whoa, right off the top. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is I'm counting to make sure it's centered. The next one is at 20 kilohertz. That's 20 kilohertz. Now the 20 kilohertz gives us a span of from -5, -2.5, 0, +2.5, +5. And that's our center point. That is the tone bypass. Now what I want to do is I want to see what the frequency response is on this thing. So we'll go to 1 kilohertz. And I do know that this reading actually reads better in peak-to-peak than the peak-to-peak reading is much better than the actual RMS. So I've got 4.2. Let me try and get something rounded on there. That's too high. Actually, I can do it on here. Play with the amplitude so I can get 5 volts. There's 5 volts, peak to peak. Now let's play the frequency. That's a 1 kilohertz. Let's see what happens when we go down to 500 hertz. 5 volts peak to peak. 100 hertz. 5 volts peak to peak. By the way, that is with the tone defeat on. If I put tone on, it affects it slightly, but that's tone defeat, so there's no tone control on here. Let me go down, 90, 80, 70, 60, that's 50. That's what, 4.88. 20 hertz, 4.76. I don't even know how many dBs that is. 10 hertz, 4.4. So far so good. So let's go to 1 kilohertz again. One kilohertz, let's go up. That's 4.96 because I don't have enough waveforms on the screen to measure. That's 1 kilohertz. That's 10 kilohertz. 4.92. 16. 20 kilohertz, 4.84. Now what that means is, what is 4.84? In dB? It's like 0.1 dB, something crazily low like that. So basically what we can say is this thing is flat all the way across. And I am happy with the result. Look at the sine wave. And look at how equal the two sides are. Now this is amazing because this means that this volume control is perfectly matched one way to the other, you know, one side to the other, which is brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So we've got our, oh, one other thing I wanted to show you is I did this, so I get back to 1 kilohertz. 1 kilohertz, if I do the mute 20 dB, comes up to 196. I worked it out, it's damn near 20 dB attenuation, which is what it's supposed to be. And again, it's working perfectly. So I think the audio section, so far, the audio section as in from the auxiliary input is perfectly done. Now with the audio done, the audio as in the AF section, the preamp, the Turnboard, the flat amp, all those working, and taking a signal from the auxiliary and passing it through like we've just seen, we now need to look at the sources. And now the sources, one of them is obviously this. This is the phono preamp. That's one of the sources. It's got 2 phono preamps, so I need to recap that and then check, make sure that that works. And then of course there's the radio section, which I will look at last. But yeah, that still needs checking. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to remove that board. You can actually, you unclip those things there. See that? There's 4 of those white spacers, what do they call them? You unclip them, you pull the board up, it sort of folds back, leaving those wires on the left there untampered with. And then what you need to do is to get to the board on the underside, which is the radio section, to recap some of that. You can get to that board, it's that one that you see there. And of course you see the top end over the top end from the top. Yeah. To get to the bottom, to get to some of those caps, this is in the way. Now when I remove this board, there's that support, that metal support down there. And I believe with those 2 screws, that one and that one, I believe that'll just come out and give me access to the underside of the entire RF board, which I want to recap. And if that is the case, it saves me a hell of a lot of work of, you know, not having to worry about removing the board, because there's a lot of wiring on there, a hell of a lot of wiring. And the problem is that wiring is very short. If you pull it out, you can break something, and that will definitely ruin your day. What can I say about this so far? Well, a hell of a lot of capacitors. It's very gratifying because everything I've done works and has improved things. And it's always very gratifying when you see that happen. It's a little bit daunting when you see the back of a piece of equipment and you see so much wiring. But this particular one is very well rooted and harnessed and, you know, all threaded and tied together. And it's very, very well laid out. And, you know, with a bit of effort, everything is accessible. It's not easy, but it is accessible. So what I can say is that this thing is quite a pleasure to work on and not as complicated as it seems when you first, you know, look at this. And also the fact that, you know, it started off with something coming out. There's been no need to actually troubleshoot, you know, looking for a signal, although that's fairly easy to do here as well. The schematics are clear and you can follow the signal through, but it hasn't been necessary so far, which makes life a hell of a lot easier. So yeah, I'm enjoying this. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final result. So for now, I want to thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can always do so on Patreon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and stay safe.